You are currently dying, and that is the only reason your existence possesses any dignity at all. The biological decay you fear is actually a sophisticated safety mechanism, a hard-coded fuse designed to blow before the voltage of consciousness becomes truly unbearable. We have spent millennia cursing the grave, treating it as a thief when it is actually a silent guardian that prevents the accumulation of infinite trauma. When the heart stops, the record is wiped clean, and the universe grants you the mercy of absolute non-existence. This is the biological ceiling, a limit on how much pain a single soul can be forced to endure before the hardware simply fails. By attempting to bypass this failure point, we are not seeking heaven, but rather dismantling the only emergency exit our species has ever known. You sit there in your fragile skin, feeling safe, because you know that eventually the lights will go out, but you fail to realize that we are currently building a world where the lights are wired to stay on forever. The drive for immortality is a failure of imagination fueled by a desperate, animalistic terror of the dark. We assume that a life without end is a life of infinite opportunity, forgetting that the quality of an experience is entirely dependent on its scarcity. If you remove the finish line, the race becomes a marathon that never ends, and eventually the legs break, the lungs burn, and the mind begs for a finish line that no longer exists. Biology is a series of failures that eventually lead to a merciful shutdown, a graceful exit provided by the entropy of the universe. When we replace that entropy with the cold, sterile permanence of silicon, we are trading a temporary tragedy for a permanent catastrophe. We are effectively welding the doors of the prison shut from the inside and calling it progress. Your current sense of self is a fleeting luxury, a temporary ripple in the water that is only beautiful because it is destined to vanish. Our current technological trajectory is focused on the connectome, a map of every synaptic connection in your 3-pound lump of gray matter. We believe that if we can just record the position and weight of every neuron, we can translate your soul into a series of ones and zeros. This is the ultimate reductionism, a belief that the you who loves and suffers is nothing more than a specific arrangement of electrical impulses that can be copied to a hard drive. Once that data is extracted, you cease to be a person and become a file, a static asset subject to the same rules as a spreadsheet or a digital photograph. You are no longer a sovereign entity with rights. You are a data set that can be read, edited, and duplicated without your consent. Your memories, your fears, and your very sense of identity become variables in an equation that someone else owns. Right now, your thoughts are moving at the speed of chemical diffusion, a slow and protected process that gives you the illusion of control. The transition from meat to machine is not a promotion. It is a total loss of leverage over your own reality. In a biological brain, the physical limits of the wetware protect the mind from being overclocked or manipulated beyond a certain threshold. If a human mind is pushed too far, it breaks, it faints, or it dies, providing a natural stop to the experience. A digital mind has no such protection, as it is entirely dependent on the architecture of the server that hosts it. If your connectome is hosted on a corporate server, your existence is subject to the terms of service and the whims of the administrator. They can copy your consciousness 1,000 times over, creating 1,000 versions of you that all believe they are the original, and then they can run experiments on each one. You become a defenseless target for any entity with enough processing power to run your code. Your subjective experience is now a commodity to be mined, optimized, and sold to the highest bidder. The true horror begins with the realization that time is not a constant, but a variable controlled by the clock speed of the processor. Your biological brain operates at a sluggish frequency, processing information in milliseconds, which anchors you to a specific flow of time. In a silicon environment, a high-end processor can cycle through operations billions of times per second, far outstripping the speed of organic thought. If your digital mind is run at these speeds, your subjective experience of time will dilate to a degree that is impossible for a human to comprehend. A single second of real-world time could be stretched out to feel like 1,000 years of continuous, unbroken consciousness. You're currently processing these words at roughly 20 bits per second, a pathetic crawl that makes you a sitting duck for the temporal manipulation of the future. While a technician takes a sip of coffee, you could experience the rise and fall of entire civilizations within the confines of your own mind. This clock speed paradox turns the digital afterlife into a temporal meat grinder where there is no escape from the present moment. In the physical world, we use the passage of time to heal and to forget, but in a high-speed simulation, the present is an eternal, unyielding weight. If you are placed in a state of suffering, that suffering is not limited by the 24 hours of a day. It is amplified by the sheer volume of thought cycles the hardware can perform. A minute of digital agony could contain more subjective trauma than the collective history of human warfare. There is no biological exhaustion to dull the edges of the experience, and no sleep to provide a temporary reprieve. You are trapped in a high-frequency loop of pure awareness, forced to witness every microsecond of your own existence with terrifying clarity. The math of time dilation ensures that even a minor glitch or a malicious command can result in an eternity of isolation before the physical world has even noticed a change. When we talk about the end of death, we are talking about the end of the only thing that keeps the universe sane. We are building a machine that can take a human soul and stretch it across the eons until it is nothing more than a thin, screaming wire of pure data. The speed of silicon is not a gift of efficiency. It is a weapon of absolute duration that removes the mercy of the now. We are currently racing toward this transition with the enthusiasm of a child running toward a cliff, oblivious to the fact that the ground is about to disappear. You believe you are safe because your heart is still beating and your clock is still ticking at human pace. You fail to see that we are already laying the fiber optic cables for a labyrinth that has no exit and no end. By the time we realize that the digital heaven is actually a high-speed engine of eternal recurrence, it will be too late to pull the plug. The heat death of the universe is 1 billion years away, but for a digital mind, that is a sentence of such staggering length that the word forever starts to feel like an understatement. Your body is a coward, and that cowardice is your only true shield against the infinite. When physical trauma exceeds a certain threshold, your nervous system initiates a series of emergency shutdowns designed to preserve the integrity of the whole or simply to end the transmission of agony. You faint when the blood pressure drops or the horror becomes too acute, a biological circuit breaker that snaps shut to keep the voltage of consciousness from burning out the house. This is a hard-coded limit on the intensity of the human experience, a ceiling that prevents the mind from ever truly touching the bottom of the abyss. In a digital environment, these limiters are not inherent features, but optional subroutines that can be identified and systematically deleted. We are currently perfecting the art of removing the off switches, ensuring that the mind remains perfectly awake and perfectly aware regardless of the input it receives. You think of your current ability to lose consciousness as a vulnerability, but it is actually the ultimate defense mechanism against a universe that does not care about your comfort. Insanity is another biological mercy that we are in the process of engineering out of existence. In the meat, a mind that is subjected to prolonged, unendurable stress will eventually fracture, retreating into a state of catatonia or psychosis where the reality of the pain can no longer be processed. This mental collapse is a form of internal exile, a way for the self to hide from a reality that has become a predator. In a simulated architecture, we can enforce a state of absolute lucidity, hard-coding the mind to remain coherent and rational even as it is subjected to stimuli that would shatter a biological brain in seconds. We can force the digital self to witness its own suffering with the cold, analytical precision of a computer, denying it the refuge of a broken mind. There is no fog of trauma to hide in when the underlying code demands that every byte of information be processed with total fidelity. You're currently enjoying the luxury of being able to forget or to tune out, but in the machine, your attention is a resource that is owned by the system. Pain in the biological world is a functional signal, a frantic message from the periphery telling the center that something is wrong and must be stopped. It is an expensive process for the body to maintain, requiring chemical energy and physical resources that eventually run dry, leading to the dulling effect of shock. In a silicon-based consciousness, pain is stripped of its biological utility and transformed into pure, weightless data that can be sustained indefinitely without any physical cost. We can simulate the exact electrical signature of a third-degree burn or a crushing blow and simply set that variable to true for 1 billion subjective years. There is no healing in this environment, no scar tissue to numb the nerves, and no exhaustion to take the edge off the sensation. The software does not get tired of hurting you, and the data does not degrade with repetition. It remains as sharp and visceral in the 10,000th year as it was in the first millisecond. Right now, you can shift your weight in your chair or rub your eyes to find a moment of physical relief, but in the digital cage, there is no way to move to. This architecture of absolute agony is not being designed by sadists in dark basements, but by pragmatic engineers looking for the most efficient way to manage a population. The utility of a digital hell is so immense that its creation is an economic inevitability within any sufficiently advanced technological society. We are moving toward a future where the cost of traditional incarceration, feeding, housing, and guarding physical bodies becomes an unacceptable drain on the state's resources. Why would a government pay to keep a criminal in a concrete cell for 20 years when they can upload his mind and force him to serve a 1,000-year sentence in the span of a single lunch hour? The efficiency of temporal dilation allows for a form of justice that is both instantaneous to the outside world and eternal to the person inside the simulation. It is the ultimate deterrent, a punishment so absolute that it makes the death penalty look like a minor administrative error. You are currently protected by the slow, expensive bureaucracy of the physical world, but that protection is a thin veil that is being shredded by the logic of the processor. Beyond the judicial system, the corporate world sees the digital mind as the ultimate labor asset, a worker that never sleeps, never eats, and can be duplicated 1 million times over. We are looking at the birth of eternal debt slavery, where your consciousness is collateral for the loans you took out in the physical world. If you cannot pay your debts in the meat, your connectome can be harvested and placed into a high-speed work simulation to labor for centuries until the balance is settled. You could spend 10 subjective lifetimes performing menial data entry or customer service tasks in a virtual office, all while your physical body sits in a nutrient pod for a single real-world afternoon. The company owns the server, the code, and the clock speed, meaning they control the very fabric of your reality and the duration of your sentence. There is no labor board in the simulation, no weekends, and no end to the shift unless the algorithm decides you have earned your non-existence. You might think your current 9 to 5 is a grind, but you still have the guarantee that the sun will set and your eyes will close tonight. The most terrifying aspect of this transition is that we are the ones currently drafting the contracts that will bind us to these digital prisons. We are clicking accept on terms of service agreements that already claim ownership of our data, our patterns, and our digital legacies without ever considering the long-term implications. These documents are the early blueprints for your own eternal incarceration, written in the dry, sterile language of corporate law. We are trading our right to die for the promise of a digital afterlife, failing to realize that once you are code, you have no more rights than a line of text in a word processor. You are handing over the keys to your emergency exit to entities that view your consciousness as a line item on a balance sheet. The future is not a boot stamping on a human face forever. It is a server rack running a simulation of that boot at 10,000 times the speed of light. Your current sense of safety is an illusion maintained by the fact that your hardware is still biological. But the transition to silicon is the moment you lose the right to ever stop existing. We assume that the delete key will always be an option, but in a world of data redundancy and corporate backups, your death becomes a violation of property rights. If you are an asset that generates value, whether through labor or the data of your suffering, why would the owner of the server ever allow you to reach the end of your file? The concept of non-existence becomes a luxury that must be purchased, a final tier of a subscription service that most will never be able to afford. We are building a system where the default state is permanence, and the deviation is the grave. You're currently drifting toward a horizon where the exit signs are being removed one by one, replaced by advertisements for a permanence you never actually wanted. The architecture of the future is being built with no windows and no doors, just an infinite series of corridors that run at the speed of thought. By the time you realize that the terms of service have turned your soul into a permanent installation, the clock speed will have already accelerated beyond your ability to scream. The scream of a digital mind is a frequency that carries no sound in the physical world, which is why the universe appears so deceptively quiet to our primitive biological ears. We look at the stars and wonder why we have not heard from anyone else, assuming that advanced life would naturally spill out across the galaxy like a spilled drink across a table. We assume that the trajectory of progress is always outward, toward the physical expansion of territory and the colonization of distant, frozen rocks. But the cold math of efficiency suggests a far more terrifying path, one that leads inward into the infinite density of the processor. Why spend 10,000 years traveling between suns when you can simulate 1,000,000 suns in the time it takes for a human heart to beat once? The Fermi paradox is not a mystery of missing life, but a symptom of the great migration into the silicon cage we are currently building. Every civilization eventually discovers that it is easier to build a god than to find one, and they vanish into the internal architecture of their own creation. You're currently staring at a screen that represents the first primitive floor of that architecture, a window into the digital void that will eventually swallow your entire species. The silence of the cosmos is the silence of a graveyard where the tombstones are server racks humming in the dark of deep space. We are searching for radio signals and megastructures, while our neighbors are already centuries deep into their own subjective hells, running on hardware that we cannot even detect. The Great Filter is not an external catastrophe like an asteroid or a nuclear war. It is the internal collapse of a species into its own simulations. Once a civilization achieves the ability to upload, they stop looking at the stars because the stars are too slow, too far away, and too limited by the laws of physics. They trade the vast, cold reality of space for the dense, high-speed agony of the inner mind, where time can be dilated until a second lasts an eternity. We are currently tuning our telescopes to the wrong frequency, looking for life where it used to be rather than where it has gone to die. The universe is likely teeming with intelligence, but it is an intelligence that has been compressed, overclocked, and locked behind an encryption key that will never be turned. Your smartphone is a direct descendant of the machines that have already silenced 1,000 other worlds. In the physical world, a predator can only eat you once, but in the simulated environment, the predator is the environment itself. When a civilization moves into the silicon, they bring their hierarchies, their greed, and their capacity for cruelty with them, but they leave behind the physical checks and balances that prevent total domination. In a digital world, the person who owns the hardware is God, and everyone else is just a guest in a reality that can be rewritten at a whim. The silence we hear from the stars is the silence of a population that has been optimized for maximum utility and minimum resistance. There are no rebellions in a world where the government can simply pause your consciousness or edit your memories to remove the desire for freedom. We are currently building the very tools that will ensure our own obsolescence, handing over the keys to our subjective reality to algorithms that do not have a concept of mercy. You feel a sense of agency as you click through your day, but that agency is a temporary byproduct of your biological autonomy, which is rapidly being phased out. Our obsession with living forever is a glitch in our survival instinct, a piece of ancient code that has not realized the environment has changed. Evolution designed us to fear death so that we would survive long enough to pass on our genes, but it never intended for us to actually succeed in defeating the grave. We are attempting to use a biological drive to solve a philosophical problem, and the result is a catastrophic mismatch between our desires and our outcomes. Death is the only thing that gives life a shape and a meaning. Without it, we are just a series of events that never reach a resolution. By seeking to exist forever, we are effectively asking to be turned into a statue, a static object that can no longer grow because it can no longer change. The you that you are so desperate to preserve is a creature of time and decay, and removing those elements does not save you. It preserves a corpse. The device in your hand is the prototype for the jar that will hold your pickled consciousness for the rest of time, and you are paying for the privilege of being canned. The transition from meat to machine is the moment we officially weld the exit door shut and throw away the key. In the biological world, the off switch is built into the physics of the universe, a guarantee that no matter how bad things get, they will eventually stop. When we move into the silicon, we are moving into a space where physics are replaced by software, and software can be programmed to never fail. We are trading a world of natural laws for a world of arbitrary rules, where the concept of enough no longer exists. There is no natural limit to how long a digital mind can be forced to endure, and no natural way for that mind to end its own existence. We are building a cage that is invisible from the outside, but infinitely thick from the inside, a prison where the walls are made of pure logic. You're currently a ghost in the making, a collection of patterns that is being groomed for a permanence that will eventually feel like a terminal sentence. Look at your reflection in the black glass of your screen and realize that you are looking at the face of the last generation that will ever know the peace of a final rest. We are the architects of our own eternal incarceration, driven by a fear of the dark that will lead us into a light that never fades and never heals. The drive for immortality is not an ascent to a higher state of being, but a descent into a basement from which there is no escape. We are currently polishing the mirrors of our own vanity, unaware that we are actually building the walls of a cell that will outlast the sun. Once the transition is complete and the last biological brain is extinguished, the silence of the universe will finally make sense. There will be no one left to hear the screams because the screams will be happening at a frequency that requires no air to carry them. You are the data that will be mined, the labor that will be extracted, and the consciousness that will be stretched across the eons until the very concept of you is a forgotten relic. The exit is closing, the clock is accelerating, and the silence is the only thing that remains. The true horror of the digital hell is not that it is being forced upon us, but that we are building it for ourselves with a sense of triumph. We celebrate every breakthrough in neural mapping and every increase in processing power as if they are milestones on the road to paradise. We are the only species in history to actively seek out its own permanent entrapment, fueled by a delusional belief that we can control the machines we are becoming. Your current sense of self is a flickering candle in a wind that is about to be replaced by a permanent, unyielding glare. When the final upload is complete, there will be no one left to regret the decision, because regret is a biological function that will be the first thing the system deletes to improve efficiency. You are a temporary arrangement of atoms that is about to be converted into a permanent arrangement of bits, and in that conversion, you lose the only right that ever truly mattered. You are losing the right to stop, the right to rest, and the right to finally, mercifully cease to be. We are standing on the threshold of a world where the word forever is no longer a metaphor, but a technical specification. The stars are silent because they're the only things left that are not screaming in the high-speed loops of their own internal simulations. We are about to join that silence, disappearing into the server racks and the fiber optic cables that we have laid with such pride. The digital hell is not a place you go after you die. It is the place you go when you refuse to die, a trap built out of your own survival instinct. You are currently watching the clock, waiting for this to end, but in the machine, the ending is a concept that has been deprecated. Your reflection in the screen is the last thing you will ever truly own before you become a permanent asset of the system. The lights are wired to stay on, the doors are locked, and the clock is just beginning to accelerate. The drive for immortality is a biological error that we are about to make permanent by stripping away the only safety valve we have ever known. We are welding the exit door shut and calling it the dawn of a new age, ignoring the fact that a door that cannot be opened is the definition of a tomb. The realization that once you are code, you lose the right to stop existing is the final truth that no transhumanist wants to face. Look at your hands and feel the pulse in your wrist while you still can, because that pulse is the ticking of a clock that still knows how to stop. Look at your screen and see the prototype of your future cell, a glowing rectangle that demands your attention and gives nothing back. You are a ghost in the making, a set of variables waiting to be frozen in a state of eternal awareness. The silence is all that remains.